All right, guys, so I want to talk to you about creating degrees of freedom in your body using constraints. Now, if I just ask you to move, to improvise, unless you've already got a deep experience and a library of movements, you're probably going to be like, okay, and almost feel a bit awkward. You'll probably do some sort of fairly obvious things, or you might feel a bit exposed if you're doing something you haven't done before. So the whole idea of improvisation and freedom and creativity actually opens up to us when we've explored constraints first. Okay, so in order for someone to speak a language fluently, they first have to work with the constraint of forming a particular word and using that word in a sentence. A really useful analogy for this is playing the guitar, and my friend Scotty talks about this a lot, where it's like you don't have the freedom to just go and pick up and play a guitar unless you have already practiced the principles of music and guitar playing. So freedom is something which, if we want to embody it, must be earned through skill and through constraints and learning to deal with and move within those constraints. And constraints are actually helpful in times when we're feeling really overwhelmed and where we have confusion and a lack of clarity. Constraints can come in and give us a zone of practice where we can improve the quality of our movement or the quality of our thought. So a really cool example to play with this constraints idea is within points of contact on the ground. So let's say that we're working with something like a plank. Let's say that we're doing this. If I give you the constraint of keep your right hand on the ground and move in as many different ways as possible, then here's what that might look like. Let's say I'm not allowed to pivot this hand. Okay, so I came up with a certain amount of options, and those options mainly looked like stepping, walking around the point of contact, exploring a little bit of bridging, exploring a little bit of weight shift, okay? Now, that's the first layer of constraint. Some people are going to keep doing the same things. When we have a constraint and it's quite open, we end up always looking for the same solutions because there's kind of no evolutionary pressure. So if I want to explore different options and I don't have the experience or I'm not feeling super creative, then the constraint can be don't move the feet. Okay, so now I have this, don't move the feet, move in as many ways as you can. Now obviously I can't step anymore, but I can work with stuff like this. I can work with stuff like this. I can work with stuff like this. And if you took those constraints away, because maybe I've run out of creative ideas, then I'd have to get even more creative within the constraints. Okay, so now I'm not allowed to change levels through my hips. I can only work in the line of my body. So I can perfect that. I'm not allowed to change levels, but I'm allowed to work within that line, and I'm allowed to rotate. So we see a different quality of movement. And now if I'm not allowed to bend my knees, let's say, or I'm only allowed to move them a little bit, maybe I end up exploring something like a wave. And these things all happen because of the constraint. They're not things that I would have thought to explore until my options were limited. Okay, so in a game like this, we can work with obviously different points of contact. We could have the constraint of 4 points of contact, like so. What's available to me? We can free that up by allowing some sliding, still with 4 points of contact. You have all these different game scenarios available to help you develop your relationship with your body and to reveal and develop the aspects of movement that you haven't yet explored. It only happens through constraints. That's the whole point, okay? You don't get creativity by telling people what to do. You don't get creativity by telling people, hey, try that, you're doing it wrong, try this. True creativity comes from find a way within these constraints. So this learning model I found really, really useful. I found it really enjoyable because it allows people to progress at their own rate in their own way, and everyone's process is going to look very different. Some people are going to be more constrained within a particular game by their emotions or by their mind. Other people are going to be more constrained by their body. So seeing the different aspects of self that come up and that are challenging for people in these games is the most beautiful part. And as a teacher, that enables me to kind of set people free in the learning process. And then I can invite them back and ask them what they learned, what they discovered, what they noticed. And I get to learn too, and everyone gets to learn from each other. So, really cool way to work. Now let's go beyond this a little bit, right? So, my fundamental constraint is myself, the subject, the I, and my understanding of that. It's very difficult to work with that without the reference point of an object. How can I understand myself unless I have something to interact with which shows me my deficits, my strengths, my peculiarities, and my talents? In this case, we're working with the floor, and the floor is going to show me where I'm clunky on my joints. It's going to show me where my body is feeling achy. It's going to show me the parts of my body which are more fluent and have more movement options, and the parts of me that don't. The floor is going to show me how I respond to frustration as I expect more of myself than what I'm capable of delivering. So the subject and the object creates this beautiful learning dynamic where you're actually constrained without that reference point of something to work with and something to engage with. So this is an interactive learning model as well. Now, if we talk about introducing a partner, that's when it's absolutely beautiful. But there is a layer of complexity which then needs to be managed. When I'm working with a partner, I now have a moving constraint. I have a moving medium to explore different options. If I'm pushing a partner and wrestling them and stuff, then they're going to react to my reactions. They're going to notice the state that I'm in. If I'm frustrated, maybe the floor would tell me straight away and it would be obvious that it was my fault, but maybe with the partner I think, oh, this isn't a very good partner. This partner's not bringing out my best. And so I have all these relational dynamics that come up there where I expect them to be able to help me have a good time, perhaps. So there's many more layers of complexity in partnership, and sometimes these layers offer us in a mature dynamic where there's two practitioners who are relatively self-aware, they offer us a lot of growth. But in a dynamic where neither of those people have worked with their own subject or have worked with objects, it requires a certain level of facilitation and space holding to do well. So bear that in mind. You want to have all three layers within your practice. You want to have the subject or the I, practices which involve very little external stimulus and a lot more sort of internal feeling focus. You want to have practices where there's an object that you're manipulating or a surface you're playing on or something you're interacting with, which is still going to contain the subjective experience, but it's going to kind of give you a nice reference point. And then you want to have practices where you bring that into the chaos, creativity, and broader scope of interaction of having partners or having teammates and all of that. And so that's why I think it's so important that we maintain team dynamics, that we keep either collaborating and playing games with one another, or we keep playing sports, because the sport is a perfect example of here are the rules, here are the constraints of the game. Now within those rules, you win by whatever means possible, and winning means like scoring points or whatever, but people find creative ways to do that within sport, and you don't see that a lot within fitness. And so the irony is that the fitness culture is not particularly creative a lot of the time. There are people who are creative people within it, whereas sometimes in sport, because of the interactive nature and the willingness to find a way around things, to keep moving forward, you have more creativity. So that's all I wanted to talk about, the constraints-based learning model. You can also use a wall, you can use a ball. Just create rules, just make up rules, play like a kid. Kids do this all the time. You can't step on the crack, you know, or every time you do this, like a puppy dies. Like they invent these really interesting dynamics. And whenever you're constrained in one aspect of your being, or in one plane of movement, or one dimension of life, you have an invitation to expand and to mature and to develop in other planes of movement or other aspects of your life. So that's really something to bear in mind, and I hope this has been valuable for you.